Don't be afraid of the suck. That's part of the learning process. You will never begin ready because you never can anticipate all the things that you're going to encounter.
Welcome to the Yeah But podcast, where leaders transform excuses into breakthroughs. I'm Mark Wolf, host and author of Yeah But. I interview New York Times bestselling authors, human rights activists, former CIA director, and everyone in between. Our guests share how they overcome doubts like I'm not ready to yeah, but I don't have time. Join us to learn how you can do the same. Hello, and thank you for being on the Yeah But podcast. We have our guest today, Tom Koulopoulos. Tom, I'd like you to introduce yourself to our audience. So, Tom, tell me two things about you personally, two things professionally, and why it should matter.
Oh, great way to start. So first of all, thank you for asking me to join you on this. I love the book and I can't wait to talk about it. But about me, when you start counting your life in terms of decades, you start to feel really old. I've been in tech now for, I think it's 40, 50 years. I've lost track. Always sort of at the cutting edge. I love to be on that cutting, bleeding edge because you learn so much and things move so quickly. And that was never as true as it is today, of course, with everything going on in AI. Two things about me personally. I'm a dad, love being a dad. I've got two adult kids. And my benchmark for being a cool dad is when your kids actually pick up the phone to call you for advice when they could have just as easily Googled or asked ChatGPT for that answer. That's sort of my benchmark. So whenever I hurdle that benchmark, I feel really good about myself. I love to fly. I'm an aviation geek, learned to fly when I was in my early 20s, and I recently got the thrill of my life. I didn't go into orbit or near Earth orbit, but I got to fly a Spitfire, a World War II Spitfire, which is the iconic British aircraft that sort of won the war for us in the Battle of Britain. So that was a real thrill. Professionally, I love to write and I love to speak and talk about all the things that I've learned because at the end of the day, I think I'm nothing more than just a conduit. I take really complex stuff. I have a very simple mind. I make it simple. And by making it simple, I can share it with other people. So that's a bit about me personally and professionally. Why should it matter? Because that's why we're doing this. I love to share what I've seen and what I've experienced. And hopefully through that sharing and through those experiences, I can help other folks better make sense of the world and the chaos that we find ourselves in, especially lately.
Thanks so much for that, Tom. I appreciate that. I love the view that, our kids, when they actually ask us for advice, that's such an honor. And
Oh,
it is crazy to know. And I'm a girl dad. So when my daughters, even if you do it halfway well and your
yeah,
girls actually call you for advice, you're like, look, it does stick. Some of the things I've said that
does.
I got some insights. So, Tom,
It's
one
good.
of the great equalizers is yeah, buts, right? So many people use
Sure.
them all the time. And even a guy like you who's written 14 books and has done lots of different things is not afraid to get on stage. To hear you have yeah, buts, I think the audience wants to know, like, what kind of yeah, buts can a futurist author guy who's done all these things, which would he have? What's your first yeah, but?
That's a great way to sort of start the conversation. I think we all have yeah buts. I don't know how else to say it, but I think self-awareness is sort of 50% of the battle, at least in most cases. So being aware of the yeah buts is what's important. Having them, we all have them. We have them consistently. Self-doubt is not a bad thing. I think self-doubt helps to not just check ourselves, but also it helps to give us a bit of a reality check every now and then. I think we should know when we're up against overwhelming odds. Doesn't mean we should back away from them, but we should know that. We should be aware of that because it increases our sensitivity, our ability to analyze, and our ability to solve the problem. If we weren't aware of the overwhelming odds, we may never be as thoughtful or as considerate of them. Doesn't mean we shy away from them, right? We can still, despite the yeah buts, but we can acknowledge that they serve to some degree a purpose. So you asked what are my yeah buts? At the top of my list was the I don't have time. That is the one I hear most often in some form or another. And I love it because at the end of the day, we all have the same number of minutes or seconds in the day. You bring this up in the book. It doesn't matter how many minutes or seconds you have, it matters how you use them and what you do with them. And I think the single most important thing as I look at other people that I admire for their success and their achievement, is that they are relentless and very disciplined about prioritizing how they use their time. It doesn't mean that they're always on, that they're always full throttle, right? It means that there are certain things that they will not let themselves off the hook for. They know what those priorities are. Let me share with you a mind game I used to do. I still do a fair amount of it, but not as much as I used to. A lot of mentoring of young entrepreneurs. And I would get a lot of MBA students that would come in, sit down with me because they wanted to start their own business, or at least that was the intention. So I was at Babson for many years, a great entrepreneurial school. And everyone who goes to Babson goes there because they want to start their own business. So the first thing I would ask these kids, and I call them kids because they were young, they were in their 20s, maybe their 30s at the most at the time. I would say, look, do me a favor. I want you to write down on a piece of paper 3 things in life that you will absolutely not let yourself off the hook for. And by the way, before you do it, I want you to consider the following. You've got one foot in the grave. You are dead tomorrow. Those 3 things are the 3 things that you most will regret not having done. No time for a second opinion or another diagnosis. You're dead tomorrow. What are the 3 things you will most regret not having done? They would write them down. Then I would say, okay, great. Is one of those 3 having your own business? And Mark, you'd be surprised, at least half of them, it wasn't the case. So I'd say, well, why then? Because when you prioritize your time, if you start your own business, it is going to take away from those other 3 things that you recognize that, understand that. Because again, we only have what 1,400 minutes in the day. Is that what it comes to? I think you had it in your book.
1440. Yeah,
1440. There
1440.
you go. Right. 1,400 minutes. A big chunk of them is going to go to running your own business. If that's not in your top 3 list, why are you doing it? So setting those priorities, whatever it is to you that's important, and using those minutes in a way that makes those priorities meaningful. Here's the second part of the mind game. I would then say, so if those are the 3 things that are really important to you, what have you done in the last day, the last week, and the last month for each one of those? And again, it was amazing how few people actually could respond with specific items that they had done. So make your list. You only have to make it for yourself. You don't have to share it with anyone else, but make your list and hold your feet to the fire. Make sure that those 1,440 minutes each day are being dedicated to those things that are most important to you, to your family, to your spouse, to those who you most want to serve as a result of living those 1,440 minutes a day. I think that's the best way I can think about it. So the first, yeah, but it really comes down to, have you defined what's important to you? And are you really dedicating yourself to what's important? Because if you are, there's no yeah, but. Yeah, I'd love to have climbed Everest. Yeah, but it's not that important to me. It really isn't. That's an okay yeah, but.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have had kids. Yeah, but I had to run a business instead. That's a tough yeah. I'm not taking exception to the way that you wrote the book. I love the book. It's excellent. But compartmentalize your yeah buts. There are some things in life, like Everest. I'm okay leaving this world without having climbed Everest. That's not a big yeah but for me. It's a very tiny yeah but. The big yeah buts, being a dad, running a business, being a leader, sharing ideas, writing books. These are things that were really very important to me. And I had to dedicate a big chunk of my day and my life to them. So whatever obstacles were in the way that would say, yeah, but I don't have enough time, they just weren't meaningful. I had to do it no matter what at the end of the day. That's the best way I can sort of take on that.
Yeah.
But it's a great one because that's the one I most often encounter.
Well, that's the one I think that most people used, is the whole time thing. And that's why I mentioned it in the book, is because if we all have the same amount of time, it's what we do with it. So I love your example with students. And I
Yeah.
think people never think about the end in mind. So it's interesting. So if people have to start thinking about the end in mind and then
Right.
say they want something, but they don't, tell me something that you said no to that seemed good, but you knew there was something better that you should have or had to do
Wow,
instead.
something that I said no to. You mean something I said no to because there was something else that I
Because of
wanted?
time, right? Because we're just talking about time, right? And there's so many
Yeah.
opportunities every day, Tom, to do so
So,
many different things.
so
How do you
can I
say?
be
How
open?
do you say no? Yeah,
Can I be
please.
open? Can I be open, honest, and vulnerable with you here?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think the biggest challenge I've had to overcome in my life is saying no. I would say yes to everything because, frankly, I wanted to experience as much as possible. I didn't want to let people down. Didn't want to disappoint those who were relying on me or who might, want to rely on me. So I had a tough time saying no, and it really was only until I got into my 50s, well after I'd started several businesses, that I began to realize the value of saying no. And it came back to what we were just talking about, Mark. It came back to, am I really prioritizing my time correctly and focusing on those things that are most meaningful and important to me? And the answer was I wasn't always doing that. I was doing a fair amount of it, But looking back, I wasn't being as honest with myself about how I prioritized my time. So my problem was that I couldn't say no. And it really has been only until the last third of my life, so to speak, that I've begun to exercise that prerogative and found that while it's still difficult for me, I hate to let people down and say no. At the end of the day, I've got to be my own best advocate and recognize that there are things that simply are going to detract. They might add value to someone else's life or business, but they'll detract from my life and my efforts. So it's a tough one. And I'll be quite honest with you. That was the biggest struggle for me, was to learn how to say no.
We could have a whole other episode on this because you're getting into the part I love, which is like what drives people, right? Here are people pleasers, and sometimes they give away some of their life to please all these other people, yet they really don't get to accomplish what they want to
Exactly.
because of that. Sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's just upbringing, sometimes it's
Yeah.
exposure. So yeah, this is so much fun, Tom, to talk about this thing. But if you want to add one more element of that, because I know we have some other things you wanted to talk about your yeah buts. Is there anything you want to say about that? What made you such a people pleaser?
Well, so, uh, you know, that's deep. That'll take a
See,
while.
I see.
That'll take a while. Um, and I think all these behaviors go back to early childhood, formative experiences and situations, right? But I think what's more important than what made me a people pleaser was having the ability to step back and recognize that we all have behaviors that don't necessarily serve our best interests.
Mhm.
It's because we've grown up with those behaviors. It's because they've been baked into us in our DNA. It doesn't mean we're stuck with them. We still have a choice. And what I found, Mark, is that all too often people don't want to give themselves the license to choose because it's much easier to blame the rest of the world or
Mhm.
circumstances or others on your plight, your lack of time, then blame yourself. Once you begin to take accountability for your actions, then the yeah buts become very difficult because it's easy to say, well, because of circumstances, because of this, because of that, because of him, because of her. It's a lot harder to say, well, no, because of me.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
once you start to say because of me, I think things change for you in a pretty dramatic way. And the yeah buts now become your responsibility, not that of the universe, the world, the rest of, your circle of friends and family and whatever else, colleagues and acquaintances. It's now your responsibility. So take full responsibility for everything that happens to you and for every behavior. And you'll start to see the world takes on a very different tenor than it once did.
And thank you for that. It goes back to your point. I think when people really do get asked the question of what they really want to accomplish,
Yeah,
and have all these other things that they say they need to do instead, and it's like, but hold on, isn't you don't you want to work backward from the end to what you want to do?
exactly.
But we don't measure things though, Tom. So that's the problem is
No,
that, and I
no.
talk about it in the book, I was like, people say, hey, I just want to unwind. So I'm going to go binge watch something. And at the end of watching 6 hours of Netflix, they go and they're like, I was like, did it really make you feel any better? No. I was like, then why do it? Well, I need to do something. I was like, something's not the right thing, and it doesn't give you what you say you want from it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Look, I'll take you back to that exercise, that mind game I played with
Mhm.
my students that I would mentor. I would encourage everyone to quite literally put yourself in the grave. Look back. What will you most regret not having done? There'll be 20 things. Just list 3 things, 5 things at the most. And now ask yourself, what have I done to achieve those? And look, God bless you if you've done everything in life to achieve those 3 or 5 things, and you have. That's fantastic. I mean, that's as close to self-actualization as we'll get in this lifetime. Most of us, if we're honest, not quite. So I can't guarantee you many things, but I can guarantee you every single one of us will leave this life. What will those regrets be? And don't wait until that moment. You know now what they are. So get to it. Forget the yeah buts and get to it and get those 3 or 5 things checked off the list, whatever they are.
I think one of the things that I know people really struggle with is the I'm not qualified or what if I fail? And I think one or two of those are yours as well. So which
Yeah.
one?
Well, the I'm not ready. Yeah, but you would have done it. That's the way it works. No one is ready when they first try it. I used to tell my kids growing up, you will suck until you're good at whatever it is that you choose to do. That is the nature of excellence. That is the nature of mastery. No one begins with mastery. And no one ends with mastery. It's a constant journey. So you will develop excellence as a result of sucking really bad, probably for a really long time. Again, to be fully vulnerable with you, because I think sharing. personal experiences is the only way to have these kinds of conversations. I've been a public speaker now. I've been doing this professionally for the last 40 years. I was really doing it my entire career. I didn't know it, but I was. But it wasn't until the last 10 to 15 years that I stopped sweating, that I stopped being profusely nervous and anxious before getting on stage. It took me decades to get to the point where I was completely comfortable, to the point where today being on stage is the safest place in the world for me to be. I mean, never feel more of myself and more connected than I am when I'm on stage. And that's because that's when I'm most authentic. I'm vulnerable. I'm naked up there. I am who I am. And I'm okay with people passing judgment on who I am. It took me a long time to get there. So don't be afraid of the suck. That's part of the learning process. You will never begin ready because you never can anticipate all the things that you're going to encounter. And if you could anticipate them, I'm not sure you'd ever do it. Think of parenthood. We were talking about this before the broadcast. If I knew everything about parenthood, that, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I ever would have pulled the trigger. I mean, it's a wonderful, glorious thing. It is one of the most amazing experiences. But boy, it comes hard, and it comes at you from directions that you never anticipate. So you will never begin ready. You will always begin learning mode, and you have to accept that it is the failure that represents the steps, the rungs on the ladder. You don't get from here to the last rung or the 20th rung in a quantum leap. You get there one rung at a time, and many times you're going to slip back 3 or 4 rungs, and it's going to hurt as you do.
Yeah.
That's all I can tell you there. You're never ready. If you expect that you're going to begin ready, then yeah, you will never start.
Hi, I'm Mark A. Wolf, author of Yeah, But. Perspectives can shape your success or sabotage it. However, you're not alone in facing self-doubt. Even tennis legend Andre Agassi, once the world's top-rated player, admitted, yeah, but I don't feel successful. My book, Yeah, But, helps shift your perspective with 15 standalone chapters and a quick finder to navigate excuses like this. Ready to define success and have no more yeah, buts? Click the show note link today and get your copy from Amazon or Apple Books. So, what changed your belief and feeling about going from sweating and being scared of doing it and being on stage to not?
I loved I loved the process of sharing. I loved the process of connecting with people. And here's a very odd thing to say, but I am a firm believer that fear can serve purpose in times of crisis, right? If you're out the street and a car is coming at you, you want to jump and get the heck out of the way. But primarily, fear is wired into our brains because of our evolution. Our lives were primarily fear at one point. They were not primarily joy and comfort and leisure. They were staying alive. Our DNA has wired us, and our neurological state is wired to be hypersensitive to fear. As we've evolved out of the caves to the point where most of our lives, at least for the folks listening into this podcast, is not spent in fear. It is spent in some other mode of happiness, joy, experiencing and enjoying life. Fear serves a different purpose, not to turn you away from something, but actually as a compass of what your true north is. So I mentioned I love aviation. I was terrified of heights as a child. And the way I conquered that fear, if you can ever say conquer, or came to terms with it, was by learning to fly. I scared the hell out of many flight instructors, let me tell you, when I was first learning to fly, because I was terrified of heights. It was the way that I came to terms with that fear. But what I realized was that every time I was really afraid of something, I should have been moving towards it, not away from it. So what if fear, humor me for a minute, what if fear was actually a compass setting showing you which way to go rather than what to run away from? And what if you lived your life that way? Now, I'm not saying every single time you're afraid, you should move towards the fire or the flames or whatever metaphor you want to use. But I'll bet you at least 9 out of 10, if not more times, that fear is telling you what you have to overcome, what you have to come to terms with, and what will make your life more meaningful if you do overcome and come to terms with it. I think that's a very different way to look at fear. So what got me through it, what got me through the sweating and the spinning of the room and the panic attacks, what got me through it was I really believe that the fear was something that eventually I had to come to terms with, and I would come to terms with it. I just didn't know how long it would take. And if I had known how long it would take, I probably wouldn't have gone down that
Yeah,
route. But yeah, what if fear was
yeah.
a comfort setting rather than a red flag?
I think it's kind of like time. We can use it as a negative or a positive, right?
Right.
It's like I don't have enough. People don't ask for more fear, but
Mm,
what I think we really need out of it is to what I'm feeling actually what's it supposed to be showing me, right? And I think people don't take the time to actually spend time in understanding what's going on in their head, right? We
yeah.
react or we ignore or we avoid. And I'm an executive coach. I'm a consultant. I'm not trying to be a psychologist. What I'm trying to be is a person that says, "Hey, when you're feeling this or you're seeing this, what do you think about this?"
Yeah.
Right? And Tom, what I'm seeing is, and I've seen you on stage, I'd say you did such a great job that I can never imagine you ever having fear because you were so comfortable. I was waiting for you to sit on the couch and invite people up, and you almost did. I mean, you were so inviting in the way you have conversation. And the thing is that people don't understand it's an evolution to get to that. So,
It is.
what about people that don't feel like they're qualified? So, I mean, one of the yeah buts is, yeah, but I'm not qualified.
Yeah. Okay, and what that usually means is I'm not qualified and I'm afraid I'm going to fail. What I ask people is, what about the failure do you fear? What is it specifically? Is it that you're going to disappoint someone, a parent, a colleague, a spouse? Are you going to disappoint yourself? Who is it that you are afraid you're going to disappoint? Is it the fear that somehow you will be less able to move forward in your career because this will diminish your attractiveness as an employee, as an entrepreneur, to investors? And when you have that conversation with people, it gets really squishy. They're not sure what it is that they fear about failure. They just feel the general stigma of failing. So here's what's fascinating about this is that when I was young, when I started my first business I was 29, I think at the time, there was a stigma associated with failure. It was a fairly high stigma. And I remember people saying to me, don't do this. Don't start your own business. If you fail, you'll never get another job. People will look at your resume and say, hey, what's the deal? You're going to run off on us and do your own thing. And by the way, it didn't even work out for you. That has changed so dramatically over the course of the last, 4 decades now. Failure is not a stigma. Failure is another notch on your belt. I've learned something. And I've had investors, I work with lots of investors. I've raised money for lots of companies over the years. I've had so many investors tell me, we don't want someone who's just had success. Yeah, they're great and we'll invest in them, but we want people who have tasted failure as well, because those folks have a realistic view of what they're up against and what they'll need to be able to do to achieve and to accomplish. Failure is not a stigma. Failure is a notch in your belt. Failure is, I think, in many cases, and I'm not a pessimist, so don't let this come across that way. If it sounds like it is, it's not meant to be. We think we're learning when we're succeeding, but we're really not. We're riding the wave. When we're failing, that's when we learn the hard lessons, the important lessons. So failure is just part of the process. Now, you don't want to have catastrophic failures. You want to try to mitigate and manage the failure, but sometimes it's not within your control. Um, so my counsel usually is, number one, let's define what you're really afraid of. It's not failure. There's something else that stands behind that or that somehow defines the meaning of failure to you. What is that? And number two, if you don't want to fail, you're never going to succeed. I don't know of a single success story that I've ever either personally been aware of or been part of or read about or heard about that didn't involve significant failure along the way. And so often, especially in tech, we disguise that. We tell great backstories. Not a single one of those backstories does not have numerous near fatal, near catastrophic incidences that came up in the process of building that success. The game. And the more you do it, the more you're going to fail, but the more likely you are to succeed as well.
No, you couldn't be more right. It's we really test to see who we are when we see how we deal with adversity.
I love that. Yeah,
And I talk about James Dyson in there and his 5,127,
yeah,
26 failures. So the 5,127th was the one. But it's so many people have failed so many times that you wouldn't be using the products today if they didn't push forward to try. and then fail and then recover from it and make something, or someone else's failure, you actually products were made because of someone else's failure. So
Yeah.
Tom, where did you fail and have to maybe even publicly where other people saw it and had to recover, and how'd you do that?
Oh my goodness, I couldn't. I wish I'd kept track of my failures. Maybe that's part of the key is don't keep don't keep vivid track of your failures. Um, I've had countless failures. I love the way you just presented that though. Failures do kind of show us what we're made of, and they give us the opportunity to up our game and to become better at whatever it is that we want to become better at. The failures are critical to that process of achieving mastery. The other piece of it that you just triggered when I was listening to you talk, Mark, was that it's not just the failing, because that has this negative connotation to it. It is the pivot. So you just said that in all these situations, people have come close to failing the 5,700 failures, and this was the one that hit it out of the park. In every one of those cases, there have been these pivots. And I think to myself, every good idea I've started with has changed ultimately from the notion I have of what it should look like when I began it. And the reason it changed was because in our minds, we can never build a complete pathway to success. Every pathway to success is going to include market dynamics, socioeconomic factors, all kinds of happenstance that we can't predict or project. And when those things detour you, take you off course, you've got a choice. Either get back on course or reconsider if maybe that original course wasn't the right one. And I don't care if it's Netflix that you talk about or Uber or pick any company. They've all had these enormous pivots where they've had to move dramatically from the original vision of the company or the product or the service. And it's the pivot that leads to the success. It is not the blinders that keep you on one path unequivocally without any ability to reconsider if that path is the right one. And the reality is, none of us are smart enough to be able to create that entire path from here to success. So
Yeah.
the pivot is absolutely critical. So back to your question, the things that I failed at when I began my first business. So there were two businesses that happened in close proximity to each other. My first business was a software company, Conversion Technologies, that created software that would allow you to convert one language to another. And I and a partner built that business. We built it over late nights, 24-hour days, working relentlessly as coders at the time. And when we finally began selling it, we had moderate success. It wasn't overwhelming. We had moderate success, but we had a company that was interested in buying the product. And we were absolutely thrilled that they were going to buy the product. And we weren't very good negotiators at the time. We hadn't never sold a business before. And we sold it for a fraction of what we should have. And there was so much remorse and regret. We could have done better. Why didn't we do better? What we didn't see was that seed capital was what formed Delphi Group, the company that I grew from zero to over 200 employees on 5 continents, and we sold to a multi-billion-dollar company back in 2003. So it wasn't a failure unless you drew the line at the point where we sold that first company. If you drew the line there, big failure. But failure is just a matter of where you draw the finish line. If you push that finish line out, that failure could be the springboard to something much greater. So in the moment, it feels like failure, but I can guarantee you, if you think of how you can take that failure, pivot it into something else, you may very well draw the finish line well down the road and think of that failure as a necessary stepping stone, a rung on the ladder to a much greater success. So failure just depends on when you draw the darn finish line. That's all.
It's a great point. When we're talking about yeah buts and we're talking about failure, we're talking about limiting beliefs, we're talking about things. For a man who's written 14 books, what stood out to you in our book?
There was one phrase that you used in there that I don't know why, but this stuck with me. Let your grit outgrow your zip code. And and this might not be the way that you meant it, it might be, but the way I interpreted it was that the size of your footprint should always exceed your shoe size, right? Your vision, where you want to go, where you want to be, should always be greater than what you currently are capable of or what you currently have skills to do. Let the ambition follow the true direction of what it is that you want to ultimately achieve, not what you have achieved so far. And I love this notion, and I love the word grit, and that's why it stuck with me. Like, let your your grit should be greater than your zip code. Um, we all have ambitions. We all have these wonderful goals that we want to achieve in life. And you know what? At the end of the day, I really believe that it's not the achievement of the goal as much as it is the consistency. And you bring this up in the book, the consistency and the step forward every single day towards the goal. I think if you do that, you'll never regret. You'll never. You can always wish for more success. You can always wish for more of this or more of that, but you will never regret because you would have taken your compass setting would have always pointed towards that goal, and you would have taken steps towards it on a consistent basis. I can't guarantee you that you're going to succeed by doing that, but I guarantee you that if you don't, you won't.
Yes, right. And I think about the students at Babson, and I think about how amazing it is because as a lifelong entrepreneur, starting my first business at 16, I
Yeah,
love that. But when you have them think about what the end goal is, and then
right.
starting a business wasn't part of it, doing the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. Doing the
Yeah,
wrong thing at the right time. So it's really important to question why we do things and even should we still be doing things and
yeah,
what does it look like to do things. And I mean, if you would have quit or I would have quit being in front of actual crowds, we wouldn't be able to get the message out as big as the way where it's real because we're
yeah.
there, right?
Well, but I'll add to that something. And this is not meant at all to be patronizing, but I really believe this, and I wish I had understood this much earlier in my career. I think it would have helped me to mature and to evolve much faster than I had, and come to certain realizations faster. I think everyone needs a coach. I think everyone needs a coach, and especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in the thick of it, it's a very lonely place to be. I don't care how many colleagues, VPs, partners you have, it's still a very lonely place to be. And you need someone who you can be completely authentic and open with, who will help you see yourself in a kind but accurate mirror. And I think it's difficult to do for all entrepreneurs. And there also is a bit of arrogance that comes with being an entrepreneur. You want to believe that you can do it. You want to believe that you can do it on your own, that you have the wherewithal, the cognitive skills, whatever. And the reality is that while it's great to have that ambition and confidence, you need that mirror held up to you. Um, and I think a coach is one of what you do is so important. Having a coach, it's not having a therapist or a psychologist, it's having someone who will have those conversations with you in a protected space, in a safe space, but allow you to evolve as an individual in ways that will serve those goals that you have and understand those goals that you have. Be aware of them in a more authentic way.
And I appreciate that, Tom, and that for saying that, and it's true. It is lonely. Entrepreneurs and making sure that someone can tell them things that sometimes they don't want to hear, right?
Right.
And when you're
Right.
paying for someone to actually give you feedback
Yeah.
that's going to be honest and raw, it means a lot to people. And then you have to take time out of your schedule to go and work with a coach and just
You
to
do.
kind of feed on as an advisor and consultant when I first started my business when I was way younger. And I would watch that things didn't stick because people didn't communicate or they didn't even know themselves well enough as entrepreneurs or leaders to be able to help other people. And then when I became a coach and I started working with executives, I noticed that once they start to understand themselves, they knew what to say and what not to say. They
Right.
start to know understand people better. And I think leaders really miss that a lot because if you're so busy trying to get things done, you don't actually take time to work on yourself, to
Yeah.
really hear what's going on, and to hear what your people are saying that actually could be the next greatest idea that changes the way your
Yes.
organization is.
Right. Right.
You can miss it if you miss the listening.
Yeah.
So,
Look, I think that you asked me about your book. I think this echoes a lot of what caused me to nod as I was reading the book. The two things that, if I can boil it down to just two things, which is silly to do, but the two things that to me have always typified and exemplified the best leaders are self-awareness and authenticity. And the yeah buts are all about being authentic, not just to others, but to yourself, and being aware of what really is important and what's valuable to you. And then making that transparent with others around you. That's great leadership. Great leadership is incredibly, you don't have to agree with the leader, but they're authentic and they're self-aware. And that authenticity and self-awareness, regardless of what other behaviors may come along with that, they go a long way to building the kind of organization that you'll need to succeed. Um, but that comes through hard work. Maybe some folks are born self-aware and authentic. I think for most of us, it's a journey. I think for most of us, it's a journey.
Yeah, I tell you, if you have a spouse or someone that's in your life in a way where they will be willing to tell you where you're not
Right.
self-aware, yes, there's always people in your life that really care about you. And the closer
Absolutely.
they are, I always talk about a story where I did 360s for a lot of my clients and a lot of leaders, Tom, and because I think being aware of what other people think is important in context. And the toughest people on my 360 when I did it on myself and my clients and everything else were my family.
Yeah.
And I was like, my
Yeah.
clients love me. And
Yeah.
my family would say, but we know you in a way they don't. And we
That's
get to
right.
see you in a way that and I think people miss that a lot of times. They weren't being critical as much as they were being like, hey, we see this about you and we see where you can improve. Where your
Yeah.
clients see an element where they want to receive certain things from you and there's a way where you interact with them, they don't have to live with you. So
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you really want to hold a mirror up to yourself, have your kids who share your DNA in most cases, have your kids tell you what your flaws and limitations are. And those cut deep because they know them precisely. They know exactly where those nerve endings are. And that hurts. But I remember when my kids were very little, one of the first things they did to me, which kind of blew me away, was they would say, because I've always had an office at home. They'd say when I walked in my office, "Dad, that was your business voice. Talking your dad voice." It's like, I have a business voice? Really? I had no idea, and I did, and I still do. I think, but it's just being aware of it. I would use my business voice with them, and they'd call me on the carpet instantly for it. Don't do
Mhm.
that. That's your business voice. Use your dad voice.
It's funny, and that's the thing. It's like what yeah buts are not just about business, right?
Yes.
Yeah
Good point.
buts are about what we tell ourselves why we can't do something or we shouldn't do something or
Yes.
what keeps us from doing something. And I wasn't trying to get everybody to start a business, Tom. I wasn't trying to ever get everybody to do it. What I was trying to do was to get them to think and be like, what's possible and what could change because of something that's going on? And you're like, okay, well, if something was a little bit different in your life and you just change tweak this one thing,
Right.
what could your life be like? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I would add one final yeah but to all the yeah buts that you have, which I think are all, wonderful and hit me across the side of the head when I read every single one of them because they were so familiar. The last yeah but would be, yeah, but what will you not forgive yourself for? And
Mhm.
that's the most important yeah but in my book, because that's the one we all have to live with day in, day out, 24/7, because we can't escape ourselves. So that maybe is the final yeah but what will you not forgive yourself for?
Tom, thanks so much for being on the podcast. We're going to have in the show notes just to be able to contact you. Is there anything else you want to say?
So thank you for having me on the podcast. Thank you for writing the book. It's a wonderful book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I have to tell you, I still am nodding my head every time I go back to those yeah buts. It's given me a different way to kind of talk about the world, and I love the fact you closed it on the right note. It's not just about our careers and our profession; it's about our personal lives and what values we want to most live. And the yeah buts have as much to do with that as they do anything else. So yeah, thank you for that reminder.
Thank you for listening to the Yeah But podcast. If today's episode provided valuable perspective on how to overcome the excuses that can hold you back, let us know in the comments. Remember, it's not about the yeah buts. It's about finding ways to live, learn, and lead better every day. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little kick to get past their yeah buts. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And for even more tips, connect with me at markawolf.com/podcast or on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep challenging those excuses and keep moving forward.